Good afternoon. My name is Luigi Narbone. I am Vice President of the Mediterranean Platform, a think tank in Rome. And we are very happy to welcome you today to this Red Sea Dialogue or Red 2 webinar titled From Waterways to Chokepoints. And the expanding arc of the conflict from Hormuz to Bab el-Mandeb. The Red series was launched to explore the evolving geopolitical and geoeconomic and security landscape shaping the Red Sea region. The series builds on a recent ebook titled The Red Sea, Divided by Waters and United by Opportunities, a pathway from competition to cooperation, that the Mediterranean Platform has published in January together in partnerships with the Pan-African Agenda Institute and the Middle East Council on Global Relations. The ebook, which we invite you to download freely from internet, provides a comprehensive analysis of trends and dynamics in the Red Sea area through multi-regional perspective, hosting contribution from about 24 experts and practitioners from the Middle East, the Horn of Africa, East Africa, Europe, and the US. So it provides quite an updated snapshot of the geopolitical, geoeconomic, and human security developments in the regions, but also with the view to look at potential ways to exit the negative scenarios that unfortunately have marked the region for quite some time now. The first webinar, the first meeting of the series was held in Nairobi in April. And today we have with the second one, we try to look at the growing strategic linkage between the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. As we know, the two waterways are of clear global importance, and not only for regional prosperities and security, therefore, but also because they are increasingly affect global trade, global energy flows, and the geopolitical competition. It's clear that the two waterways have become choke points and part of the 7 global choke points that have a critical impact on global maritime flows. And they can, of course, as we've seen in recent weeks, the ongoing crisis in the Strait of Hormuz as a global strategic impact, and the disruption can affect energy prices, supply of fertilizers, petrochemical, and with a knock-on effect on regional and global economies, supply chains, inflation growth, demand destruction. We probably haven't just started to see the ripple effects of the crisis that unfortunately is going to affect the whole world, perhaps in an asymmetrical way, more some of the countries that are more vulnerable, like countries in the Horn of Africa. Of course, we know from the past 3 years that similar crises have also affected the Bab el-Mandeb Suez Canal, the Red Sea waterway, perhaps in a less visible and less in more contained manner, but with nevertheless an important impact on global maritime flow. We just more than 50% of the maritime vessels have diverted through Cape of Hope in Africa, adding 12-14 days of navigation costs, delays, problems onto the supply chains. So that issue is becoming increasingly key for the global trade, and it's obviously interesting for us to try to explore how this growing linkage between the two strategic geographies, the Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb, and the two global waterways and choke points can be weaponized to provoke strategic disruptions, and what that will mean for the future. But also, we are quite aware from the studies we carried out with the ebook that the vulnerabilities at sea are heightened by regional dynamics, what happens at land, the instability in a number of countries, which intersects with zero-sum power projections by some regional countries, proxy wars, militarization dynamics, and global rivalries across the sea. So with the today conversation, we'll try to shed light on some of these critical connections between maritime security and land instability. We have today a very good panel to explore these issues. I'd like to present the panelists. So first, Professor Meari Maru, who is an expert in governance, migration, and regional security across Africa and the Red Sea region. He chairs the Pan-African Agenda Institute, that is also co-founder and member of the board of the Mediterranean Platform. He teaches at the European University Institute at Johns Hopkins at Lewis, and has strong experience also as a senior advisor at African Union and IGAD, particularly on migration, governance, and Red Sea regional cooperation. He is one of the leading voices connecting regional strategies and institutional reform and international cooperation. So it's very pleased to have you today, Meari. We also joined by Professor Gaudat Bhagat, a distinguished professor in the Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University in Washington, D.C., with more than 30 years academic and policy experience. Professor Baghdad is widely recognized for his work on energy security, Middle East geopolitics, climate change, American foreign policy. He is an author of numerous influential books and articles, including a recent publication defending Iran from revolutionary guards to ballistic missiles. Also joining us today is Samira Gaid, a regional security analyst and founder of Balkis, a Mogadishu-based think and do tank focused on peace and governance and security in the Horn of Africa. Samira has served as a senior advisor to the Prime Minister of Somalia and advisor to the head of mission of AMISOM, and her work focuses on security sector reform, counterterrorism, political transition, and geopolitical dynamics linking the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea and the Gulf region. And finally, last but not least, also welcome Nabil Al-Bukhari, a Yemeni academic researcher and a specialist in political thought, religion, and the state, violent groups, and social movements, and democratic transformation in the Arab world and the Horn of Africa. Through his research, publication, and institutional initiatives, including the founding of Arab Forum for Study in Sana'a. He has contributed extensively to debates surrounding Yemen security, identity, and political transformation in the region. So, as you can see, we have very interesting panel today, and I would start with Meari. Perhaps you can, Meari, draw us a little bit of this strategic picture on what we are moving, what we are talking about, how the choke points are increasingly connected, and how they are also, particularly in the Red Sea, increasingly connected to dynamics at land in the Horn of Africa and across the Red Sea as well. Meari, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Luigi.
Let me just add, we will have a couple of rounds of presentation and conversation, but we also invite the participants to write their questions in the chat, and we will try to respond to some of these questions towards the end of the panel. Mary, please, I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No worries. Thank you so much for this, and welcome all of you, and thank you for joining us. We hope this will be an interesting conversational webinar. I'll be very brief, so Luigi, please do stop me when the time is over. I would like you to take that as literally as something that will keep us on time. Now, what I want to do is, let me see if I can share some slides that could help us to situate this in numbers and figures so we can fully understand what we are talking about. I know other colleagues will also add on this. But before I go to the slide, I want to highlight my focus area because others, Samira is here, Nabila too. So they will add on the African perspective in particular, but also overall reactions and positions of the both sides of the Red Sea. Now, 4 points. First, very quick points. The nexus that you have mentioned, the land and sea nexus, that to a large extent that has been said. This is basic, but I think it's good to start with the basics. That maritime security always, or security on the sea, is dependent to a large extent determined by the stability and security on the land. It's an extension of the land. Where you have the land stability on the land, then seaways also are stable to a large extent. Not always necessarily, but to a large extent, governance and stability on land affects or determines the on-sea stability and security. The second point I want also to put is geography is power. Geography is agency. Geography is opportunity that it provides. Geography could turn into a choke point, a security choke point. Even great powers could be having a significant problem when there is no cooperation by state or non-state actors, or states that act like non-state actors in some cases, where they operate, and they could actually have a big leverage when this geography is turned into choke point. We have seen it in the Strait of Hormuz, and we have seen it before in Bab el-Mandeb, where the Houthis had a big damage and influence leverage, even if in terms of their capacity to control and ensure governance in Yemen is limited, but they were sufficiently enough to be disruptive. So if there is sufficient power with this kind of choke point, geographic choke point, then the leverage is heightened. And it could go beyond that, this agency. Remember Djibouti, for example, the fact that the location allows it to be the biggest place where many actors have military base, and that gives leverage. Threats to its territorial integrity and independence was to large extent repelled because all restraints were exercised by other powers, neighboring countries, because of that, the fact that it has a strategic location, and the concentration of external actors gives it a special position. The same could be talking about Eritrea, Sudan, Somaliland, Somalia, and that this offers agency, not only opportunity, but also agency. And depending on this agency and opportunity depends how fast they can use it, depends on how ready they are. And how ready they are is dependent on how they are governed, whether the regime type, their capability, the state capability, and the state regime type are very important factors that provides whether they are ready to leverage to use this agency or not. We have seen it, for example, with the diversion, like you said, Luigi, with the diversion of many of the shipping lines. Some countries have benefited more than others. And there are reports coming that those that are very well run countries and ports that have been competitive, that they have benefited a lot. For example, the Kenyan ports compared to the other ones, or Mauritius, Seychelles, and others that have done better than others. And for those countries that are facing significant problem, actually on land problem like Sudan and others, they are not able to effectively benefit from that. Or the last point is we can also link this one. The fourth point is that what we are seeing could be framed as the erosion of international law, especially the use of force. That the use of force, that before there were a restraint, that it was considered as the cornerstone upon which the international order, rule-based international order, has been built on, is eroding. Now, there seems to be, everyone sees that there is a license to use force at will. And this has been going on for some time now. Of course, for the global south, this has been faced for a long time. But even now, it is more pronounced, both in Europe, in the case of Ukraine and so on, Middle East now, and Latin America and elsewhere in Africa and the Red Sea. So the erosion of the law of the use of force, that the restraint, the cornerstone being eroded, that means multilateralism is affected. But more than that, the freedom of navigation under international law of the sea is affected also significantly. And it is related to that. Freedom of navigation is significantly affected because on land, on sea, use of force is significantly undermined. And you can see this in this slide, that geography, power, and interest coming together in forming alliances, forming what kind of normative framework are undermined and what are being maintained. But that is an element that we can see in this. Just to give you an additional number, again, to speak in numbers and maps, that you can see Bab el-Mandeb is actually bigger, almost five times bigger in terms of being serving as a conduit or a global shipping choke point compared to Strait of Hormuz. It's lower than, of course, the Malacca Strait and the South China Sea, but East China Sea. But for the overall global shipping, Bab el-Mandeb is still critical. If you were to compare it with oil, that is different. That's the reason where Strait of Hormuz becomes actually the most important choke point. Strait of Hormuz, about 16.8%, 16.8 million barrels per day are transited through Strait of Hormuz. Most of this oil goes to Asian consumers. So that makes it also unique in terms of geopolitics, but also geographical asymmetry in terms of the use of the Strait of Hormuz. And this is to be compared, like I said, with the previous one on global shipping of traded goods in general, or merchandise in general, that about 22.6% is here. Yes?
You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, all right. And we can also, I think others will speak a little bit on that, but the impact on economic shocks, both foreseeable and that we see, are also affected by the crisis that we see in this Strait of Hormuz. 30% of African fertilizer, for example, imports are from or through the Gulf region. Iran alone, about 7% fertilizer is provided by Iran to Africa. And 29 African currencies have depreciated against USD. since the conflict onset. And also, there are projected decline in growth that we see. And this is 1 to 3 months conflict. If the conflict continues, it will be even more difficult, and the impact will be deeper if it's actually more than 6 months, especially on food, energy, and fertilizer. But we see some of the impact on food and energy actually to different countries. And I will show this slide and stop. This is double-digit inflation that is projected as a direct consequence of elevated energy and food prices driven by conflict. And the most affected one is Sudan. 74.7, 75% almost inflation. And this is a country that is seriously affected by the war. More than half of the population, more than 25 million of the population needs humanitarian aid. More than 12 million of the population, including long protracted displaced persons from Darfur time 2003, are affected by this. So the impact could be severe on these countries. But you can see the inflation affects many countries that are highly dependent. Some countries that are very well prepared have benefited from that. The potential windfall, for example, you see here, North Africa, because the price increase in oil for countries like Algeria could be high. But for South Sudan, for example, which is poorly managed, the oil potential windfall of oil price is not going to be seized because it's poorly governed, poorly managed resource. While for some that are well prepared, especially North Africa, for example, from Africa, but elsewhere also they are benefiting, like Russia and others. But for Algeria and the kind of countries that are producing, this could be a potential windfall. Let me stop here, Luigi, and I'll bring some of the additional points later on in the discussion.
Thank you, Mary. I think that gave us a very good overview on what the dynamics and the trends are going to play, how they're going to play out. I'd like now to move to Gaudat. Perhaps if you can bring in the external power dimension. I mean, the US and how the US is playing its hand, both in of course, in the war, but more than the war. What are the reverberation and the repercussions in terms of US policy and its role in ensuring maritime security in the Red Sea, which is another critical waterway. Please, Gaudat.
Thank you. Thank you, Luigi. And the war with Iran highlights how important United States is to Middle Eastern security and maritime security. More than Europe, more than China, more than Russia. By far, United States is the main security provider. All the negotiation about ending the war is between the United States and Iran. Russia, China, and Europe are taking back seat. So there is no way to underestimate the important role United States plays in maritime security and global security. The war with Iran also highlights the importance of el-Mandeb and Red Sea, because with the de facto closure of Strait of Hormuz, now countries are trying to diversify ways to export their oil. So the East-West pipeline in Saudi Arabia has emerged as the most important pipeline now, with about 7 million barrels per day. And from there can be exported either, the oil can be carried either to Europe or to Asia. If it goes to Asia, the main market, to Gulf oil and gas, it will go through el-Mandeb. And this how the connection between Strait of Hormuz, between the war with Iran and the Red Sea. The war with Iran also highlights how important to have stable countries next to the Straits. In the beginning of the war, President Trump and Israel entertained the idea of supporting the Kurds, basically making Iran failed state or dismantling Iran. When we take this to the Bab el-Mandeb, to the Red Sea, there are weak states or semi-failed states, and this is bad for maritime security, bad for global economy. It is very important to have strong, stable states, as Mihari mentioned. Stability on the ground affects stability in the sea. So this is very important. I can talk more about regional powers, but first I will talk about global powers, how they are trying to maintain security, maritime security, and the experience in Bab el-Mandeb is very interesting. The European Union tried Operation Upsides, and United States tried under Biden and Trump administrations military operations. Israel bombed al-Houthi, and all of them to great extent failed. This makes the point that at the end of the day, there is no substitute for diplomacy. Military power does not guarantee maritime security. It is important to negotiate with littoral states and to reach agreement on free navigation. Whatever happens in Strait of Hormuz will have impact on Bab el-Mandeb, because basically it is the first time ever Iran tried to close or to control the strait. Regardless of the outcome of the negotiation between the United States and Iran, Iran has set the precedent that straits can be closed. So this will impact Bab el-Mandeb and other checkpoints, and I will not be surprised if at one point Yemen and Eritrea, Djibouti will negotiate to collect tolls or fees, and the whole world will watch what will happen. In a minute or two left, I will say a few words on China. China is the main importer of oil and gas from the Gulf, and China has military base in Djibouti. So China has taken important position in the war on Iran. The Iranian foreign minister just visited China yesterday, and China supports opening the strait. But China is in good position because China is the leader in renewable energy. So what happened in the strait and probably what will happen in Bab el-Mandeb highlights energy insecurity and over-dependency on oil and gas and the importance of renewable energy. This plays well for China. I'll stop here and probably later we'll talk more about regional powers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gaudat. Perhaps now I'd like to move to Samira Gaid. Perhaps you can give us an overview on how the Horn of Africa country, Somalia in particular, but please feel free to talk about other countries are reacting to the ongoing crisis and the increasing connection between the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. Please, Samira, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me know if I drop off, then I can
It's a bit broken. Perhaps
switch off the video because my internet has been shaky.
maybe you can turn off the video.
Thank you again, and appreciate organizers. Switch off the video.
Yes, but you're still broken. Please try now.
Okay, I'll continue.
Go ahead.
The next Horn of Africa.
No, I'm afraid your connection is unstable at the moment. Perhaps we try to move to Nabil first, and hoping that the connection stabilizes. Nabil, moving to you, looking at developments in Yemen. What? Please go ahead and make your points.
Okay, well, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you for all of you. Thank you for the Pan-African Agenda and Mediterranean platform for this opportunity to talk about these developments in our region. For the Yemen, I think that let me give you a brief about Yemen shortly. Yemen is a large country with an area of approximately 500,000 square kilometers. It overlooks the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, and the Gulf of Aden, with coastlines straight about to 2,000 of the world's most important maritime through which nearly 12% global trade and oil bases through. In 2011, a revolution erupted that allowed the Houthis to rape its throat. They seized power and overthrow the legitimate government in September 2014. This situation continues to this day, despite a long war that highlighted 4 years ago without achieving any restoration of the Saudi-backed Yemeni legitimate authority. Before we begin, allow me to recall a statement made by the former president, Yemeni President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi, shortly before the Houthi coup in September 2014. He said, Hadi, if Iran manages to control the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait through the Houthi group, in addition to its control over the Strait of Hormuz, then Iran will no longer need to acquire nuclear weapons. This is a high condensed statement that highlights the strategic importance of these straits, which control the basic of an estimated 14% of the world's energy supplies and global trade. This statement led us to understand the complexity, the current war between Iran and the US and Israel, which state as the war to ban Iran from getting the nuclear weapons and stopping the uranium fertilizing but suddenly the war changed to the war for sake the reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which was already open. Returning to the Houthi groups, this is an ideological group that belongs to the Zaydi Shiite sect and political loyalty to the Iranian project. It has achieved everything it has accomplished largely due to the substantially Iranian support receives. Today, it is a major player in Yemen and the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb region. What is strange, however, is that during this latest war, the Houthi have no intervened directly by the closing Bab el-Mandeb or targeting ships. This might be because the Iranians have not yet given them the green light to do that. The Houthi group represents a genuine threat to the international security and safety in the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb. The international community has contributed to the situations by dealing with this group from the very beginning as a tool to control the democratic change revolution that took place in Yemen in 2011 as a part of the Arab Spring uprisings. I believe there is no way to eliminate the danger threatening international navigation in Bab el-Mandeb except by supporting the legitimate Yemeni government and providing it with all forms of assistance to retake the capital Sana'a, which is currently controlled by the Houthi group. Without this approach, the Houthis will remain in their position, continuing to pose a threat to the international security and safety in the highly sensitive region of the world. The international community must clearly understand these questions. The collapse of the national state on the both of shares of the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb will continue to pose the real threat to the international security, maritime navigation, and global supply chains in the region until the national state is restored and fully supported in the vital part of the world. Supporting the legitimate government and the restore state authority in these countries is the only key to resolving all the crises in the region. Yemen is not poor country. It is rich in natural resources such as oil, gas, agriculture, and minerals. However, it is suffers from the several lack of the security stability, good administration, and sound governance. The only solution today is to resolve state control over the area held by the Houthi militias, which don't believe in the state, democracy, modernity, or stability. These situations urge the international community to shoulder its responsibility by the supporting and encouraging all efforts to strengthen the concept of the nation states in the both Yemen and the Horn Africa. Finally, I can conclude my brief observations, hoping that there will be some questions which will help me address what do you like to know about the Houthi and Yemen in these situations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nabil. Perhaps Samira, I see that you have changed you're now with your phone. Your connection may be more stable. Please try to go ahead and see we can hear
Yes.
you.
Thank you. I hope I'm much clearer now because I'm
Yes.
just on data.
Yes.
Okay, apologies again for that issue. And I want to again thank you for convening this discussion at this critical moment. And as just has been mentioned, I think by Mehari as well, that the Horn of Africa, I'm not going to try and describe the entire Horn of Africa and the impact, but specifically for Somalia. But the Horn of Africa, to be clear, is not insulated from developments that happen in the Gulf. Every major disruption, whether it's oil prices, Gulf rivalries, maritime security, it usually reaches the Horn shores. But this current war, I think, is making it especially clear that Somalia is not only affected by the crisis similar to other countries in the Horn, but it's one of those countries where the consequences are felt immediately, more structurally, and with very few buffers. Other countries are able to internally prepare or reorganize, but Somalia is not got the same capacities. I want to just briefly highlight a few reasons why. The first one is Somalia's extreme economic dependence on maritime trade. We are near total importers. Somalia imports almost everything by sea. Food, fuel, fertilizer, manufactured goods. This is, I think, one of the major issues that we are facing. There's very little domestic production capacity that can absorb external shocks. You would be surprised something as simple as toothpicks is imported in Somalia. And especially at this point, at this time where there's been droughts and floods, there's a lot of dependency on fuel and generators. And this really impacts not just the capital city, but also the periphery. There's usually high demand around this time. Over the past month alone, Somalia's ship arrivals have declined by more than 50% because of disruptions through the Hormuz. Somalia's main supply routes are Jebel Ali and Oman. So, of course, because of this, importation has really been affected. Similarly, customs revenue has fallen sharply. The Ministry of Finance have reported that more than 50% also decline in revenue over the past month and a half already. So this just reflects to you how quickly any regional instability transmits into Somalia's economy and then is already visible in daily life. This because, as I mentioned, fuel prices will obviously hike. They have doubled. It's around it went up by 108% since the outbreak of the war. This has exceeded the spikes during COVID and even after the Ukraine crisis. Prices of imported staples that we use quite a bit, rice, sugars, flour, they've also surged. And then families who, of course, already earn bare minimum are paying much more for these basic necessities. And this compounds the already humanitarian crisis that we already had, where we knew that around 6 million people were facing severe food insecurity from March onwards. So I think from this, you can understand that for Somalia, this crisis, this war is translating very quickly into hunger, into displacement, and into a shrinking survival space for ordinary people. The second issue I wanted to mention is geography, and specifically around Berbera and the Gulf of Aden, the piracy issues that we're already experiencing. Somalia doesn't just sit on or near the tensions between the Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb. It's increasingly pulled into them. This happened specifically because of the recognition by Israel of Somaliland earlier this year that preceded the war. This transformed Somalia and Berbera specifically into this strategic security question tied to the Red Sea militarization. Berbera and Somaliland's proximity to the Houthi-controlled territory, combined with existing Emirati infrastructure there, has elevated Berbera's military significance considerably. And now we're seeing discussions about Israel possibly positioning military forces there. There's already discussions around intelligence cooperation, drone operations, and forward logistics positioning. So this is really pulling Somaliland and Somalia into this crisis. The Houthis have already designated Berbera as a potential target, as was mentioned by my colleague. Armed groups inside Somalia, of course, spoke about this recognition in Al-Shabaab, ISIS, Somalia, threatening that if there's any Israeli military presence in Somalia, that they would respond in kind. And what this means is that Somalia, after now the Iran war, risks being drawn further into this regional confrontation because of how these actors might utilize Somaliland or not. Whether this is initiated or not, we need to see how it progresses. But what we had was an already fragile and unresolved internal political crisis between Mogadishu and Hargeisa, but it's now led into the Red Sea militarization and great power competition, because America is also looking to set up a base in Berbera, reportedly. The third issue that I think is quite important at this specific moment is the internal political and security fragility of Somalia at precisely the wrong moment. We've always been we've always been described as extremely fragile, but at this moment, within this quarter, we're going into an election. Somalia is entering this crisis while navigating this political transition at home. The parliament's mandate has expired as of 14th of April. The president's mandate is expiring in a couple of days by the 15th of May. What we've understood is that the government, the president, and parliament intend to extend their stay by another year. The group that used to mediate this kind of conflicts, the international community, don't really have the bandwidth at this moment because of Iran war, and even previously had started disengaging from Somalia. And so what we're seeing is both sides, I would say the opposition groups and government, openly mobilizing against this potential extension scenario. The government is accelerating negotiations, at the same time security deployments. Just last month, we saw the government militarily oust a leader of a federal member state, replacing with an appointee from Mogadishu. The opposition are said to be also preparing for a possible armed confrontation. The arms market are reporting a spike in purchasing. And so this, I think, compounds exactly what's happening within Somalia, and the lack of attention by external partners, Gulf states, regional actors, Kenya, Ethiopia, who would usually intervene, and of course, Western governments who have been increasingly distracted by this wider Middle East crisis. We're heavily dependent on this external political attention, financial flows that are being, there's rumors that they will be cut off, and then the security coordination during this time. So this, I think, would be one of the areas where we see the most impact with the shrinking diplomatic bandwidth. Al-Shabaab on its side has been regrouping, not because of this current war, but over the past year when the government has changed focus from Al-Shabaab to politics. So we've seen them regrouping, reorganizing, taking back majority of the territory. I would say other than 3 districts, they've retaken most of the territory that was captured, taken by the government since 2022. And so we are in for more political and security fragility. As I mentioned earlier, the humanitarian situation is severe. Millions are being affected by drought. The capital has seen increased flooding with the rains that have come through. So when we speak about maritime choke points, strategic waterways, and this regional security architecture for Somalia, it's not something that's distant, geopolitical context that's far, but its impact is really felt on the ground. And for me, the final point that I'd just like to make, and a question for this discussion, would be whether any regional security frameworks that could emerge in response to this crisis would have any meaningful place or response for the civilian populations, because they're the ones who are absorbing, I think, the greatest cost. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer more questions and elaborate more in upcoming rounds, or if there's any Q&A section at the end with the participants.
Thank you, Samira. The picture you are providing us on Somalia is quite dire, and of course it's a very good example of how maritime and instability coming from maritime insecurity gets it immediately into deep effects on a country that is facing enormous challenges such as Somalia. But I like also to perhaps in the second round of questions to look at prospects to move away from these dynamics. We know that war can clearly intensify existing instability and state weakness in a number of countries, and if this is compounded with increasing militarization or lack of diplomatic responses and capacity to intervene, it's obviously we are going to get into a much bleaker picture in the next months or years. So, Mary, going back to you mentioned geography as an opportunity. I mean, just whether it can be leveraged. I mean, we know it can easily be weaponized. We've seen it under our own eyes. I think many of you have said we may set for a more complex picture in the next years, because many of the taboos in international relations, including the use of force, the weaponization of choke points, etc., have been broken. So, I mean, whether this will be allowed to continue unabated will only get more negative consequences. But perhaps we should try to focus in this second round on whether this can be turned around. What can be done to use the opportunities that are created by geography to create responses that slowly, gradually move us away from these negative scenarios. Mary, please.
Thank you, Luigi. And I think listening to the other interventions, I assume that there will be additional points that could be raised from their perspective. I would, first of all, I mean, this is part of the global, like you say, the global trend that we see, the erosion, assault, undermining, collapsing, whatever term word you use to describe of the rule-based international order that was there. And with emergence of countries using force to secure their interest. Previously, self-defense was the exception for the use of force. Beyond that, when there are differences between countries, they would have to go to the UN Charter channels to solve, or other kind of channels to solve, but not use of force as a first resort to ensure interest. Now, the question is, how do we even, the bigger question is, you have the international order being abandoned for the global south. It has never been anyways as beneficial as it was to the privileged global north in the beginning. But within that also, war or additional wars will not benefit Africa at all, as we can see even the impact immediately from Middle Eastern crisis. Now the war has immediately impacts on the economies of these countries, the livelihood of many countries, and that means even the kind of talk of rapture is not a good option for Africa in general. However, the old rule-based system was not beneficial for Africa, so there must be a talking conversation around what will be a more fair, more sustainable order. And the starting point, I always say, is has to be international law-based. International order that is based on rule-based. International order is not necessarily, doesn't directly mean international law-based international order, because the international law that we talk about, the law of the sea, law of freedom of navigation, use of force, but also international humanitarian law, human rights law, refugee law, and other kind of laws has been acquiesced by many African countries. So it will be for the benefit of Africa and the Red Sea in general. And the push should be to ensure that this fight for international law-based relationship is very important. And there are two ways to look at it. One is to still continue pressure countries to come together to ensure that international law are respected, and international law is respected, and as such, countries are coming together in this regard. And the second one, in the absence of global efforts, this global institutions, regional, continental bodies that could have played a big role, but they are not fit because they were designed for, especially in the African continent, for post-Cold War world order under a UN umbrella, a US umbrella. They are not fit as they were. They were designed for different time. So the need to adjust this so that they are fit, more fit to the current demands will be important. And at the center of that should be international law. And they may play a big role, but since they may not come fast in terms of transformation, these are multilateral institutions that can bring member states together, and negotiation takes a long time. The alternative to this is to have more local mobilization. Local mobilization by coastal countries among themselves, but coastal communities has to come together to demand changes in the way that power is being used, in the way resource is plundered, in the way even identity is introduced in this kind of competition, geopolitical competition. So more localized efforts will be important, and a bigger umbrella also, a bigger tent of preventive mechanism, some sort of preventive mechanism by both sides of the Red Sea, the Gulf countries and the Horn of Africa country should be initiated. It's not easy at this time to see that coming, but somewhere it has to start. And there might be common grounds, people who could think around this, not necessarily at state level, but at track 2 level, track 1.5 level, and so on. And Invoice and others to come together and discuss on how to bring a bigger tent of preventive mechanism for war not to come to the Bab el-Mandeb. The Strait of Hormuz is already victimized. It's already a theater, but Bab el-Mandeb could be easily, as many of you have said, and that there is a need for a preventive mechanism that has to be developed, and somewhere it has to start somewhere as an initial step.
Thank you, Mary. Preventive mechanisms, diplomacy. Bhagat, you mentioned the fact that maritime security missions over the past several years have not achieved the objectives. I mean, they probably managed to mitigate some of the challenges and threats to maritime flows, but certainly they have not taken away the risks of this repeating itself or on the part of Houthi or other non-state actors, or perhaps even getting worse, as somebody has said already during the panel, as examples have been now set in the Strait of Hormuz. We could see new forms, including toll payments or all sorts of limitation to the freedom of navigation. And the military response appears difficult, perhaps not up to for purpose. I mean, certainly not capable of taking away the challenge itself. So the issue is, how do you combine maritime security and diplomatic efforts? And how do you see this now moving forward? I mean, the US seems, at least the Trump administration seems to be saying maritime security is not our problem, it's problem of regional players, of Europe. How do you, but it's not just the military dimension that needs to be brought into the picture, but it's also a broader diplomatic dimension, a preventive dimension, as Mearis was mentioning. How do you see this moving forward?
Yeah. One takeaway from the war with Iran is something Iranian officials have been saying since the war started. You cannot import security. And for many years, Gulf states thought that partnership with the United States, having American military bases, will ensure their security. This has been proven the opposite because of close military cooperation, security cooperation. Gulf states have been targeted by Iran. And I believe there is no way around it in order to improve maritime security in the Gulf and in Bab el-Mandeb. Regional states have to work together. And talking about regional states, like any countries, regional states have different agendas, sometimes opposing agendas, and it is very clear between United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. All of us are aware how UAE withdrew from OPEC in the last few days, but United Arab Emirates sees its security by close alliance with United States and Israel. And this has impact in Bab el-Mandeb. UAE and Israel are supporting Somaliland, and Saudi Arabia is working with Egypt, Turkey, and Pakistan to push back. And despite the war, despite Iran's attacks on GCC states, Saudi Arabia has not closed the door with Iran, trying to resist having the Middle East completely been controlled by Israel. In Bab el-Mandeb, United States is approaching Eritrea now. For a long time, United States considered Eritrea as very much like North Korea, but given the strategic location of Eritrea, United States now is considering normalizing relations or establishing relations with Eritrea. With Somaliland, Trump administration took a good position, not following Israel, not recognizing Somaliland. And the point I'm trying to make is that at the end of the day, regional powers cannot depend on external forces, either United States, China, Europe, or Russia. There has to be a regional mechanism to support economic development, political stability, and security. And this is why I believe it is important. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, all these are regional powers. It is important to work with African countries. And another important country we have not talked about is Sudan, the civil war and instability in Sudan. This another area of competition between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. One final point I want to make also, you cannot defeat non-state actors. Nabil talked about al-Houthi, the experience in the last 20, 30 years from Taliban in Afghanistan, from al-Houthi in Yemen, from Gaza, from Hezbollah in Lebanon. Non-state actors can take heavy military defeats, but they are not defeated, they survive. I remember when the war in Afghanistan started, 2001, there is no way anybody can imagine that the Taliban will be in power today. Hamas, after all these Israeli attacks, Hamas still exists in Gaza. Same thing about Hezbollah in Lebanon. Al-Houthi have been subject to Israeli, American, British, Saudi, Emirati attacks, and they still control big part of Yemen. So all these things show there is need for diplomacy, there is need for stability, economic prosperity. This is a way to ensure maritime security. In war, everybody loses. In peace, everybody wins.
Thank you, Gaudat. Indeed, it seems clear that a certain idea of security through force as shows evident limitations in all the cases you mentioned. Perhaps Samira, on the case of Somalia, I mean, you mentioned, I was struck by the usual problem. I mean, in a country like Somalia, you would expect that much of the push to try to solve the very many issues come from the outside. But now we are facing a situation in which from the outside you get destabilizing pushes. So how do you see the role of the country and the various forces within the country to try to participate in the formation, in the creation of those mechanisms that Meari was referring to, those type of framework in which regional countries regain agency? And it's a question I ask to you because Somalia, and I will ask to Nabil as well. Those are countries in which obviously all difficulties are compounded by years of instability and war, etc. So how do you see that moving forward?
Yeah, thank you. I would say the solution is not easy, and but it's internal. I would, I think both sides, whether it's the government, opposition, this non-state armed groups, all of them recognize that the days of having Somalia as priority one for the Horn of Africa are gone. We had the Ethiopia war, the Tigray war, then we've had Sudan, and over time, over the past, I would say at least 5 to 7 years, we've seen a decline in international community interest in Somalia. So it has had a two-pronged effect. On one end, we've seen government sometimes pushing a line of sovereignty and and territorial integrity against externals, but also within internally when even other partners attempt to intervene, they push back really hard. We've had a number of PNGs. We've had international community sort of silenced, bullied into submission. The UN mission is closing. The African Union mission doesn't have much financing. So the government has taken advantage of this interest, this declining interest, to sort of strengthen its hand, unfortunately, over local political actors, over its opponents on the ground, and anyone who would want to change the current government and replace the current government. I think for the opposition, they also recognize, and other actors also recognize, that the international community is not watching and are able to push agendas much further than they would have if the international community was going to be there to call out spoilers or to sanction individuals and all of that. So on both ends, there's a bit of pushing the envelope. But what has happened is recently local elders came together to Mogadishu for one of their coronation, a coronation of one of the elders. And what we saw them is actually speaking truth to power, calling out both the government and the opposition and asking that they should be allowed to mediate and sort of forcing the hand of the candidates and the opposition to come to the table and force a negotiation. And so I'm seeing that there is a bit more agency internally. I don't think we're at the point where we will not need a big brother, an actor that intervenes. And to me, the challenge is how to speak coherently to get that attention now. If that attention doesn't come in the next, when the gap occurs, when that transition is occurring, I think it will lead to both sides taking actions unilaterally that would be problematic. So I do get the sense that actors, international communities, specifically the US, have been pulling the strings behind the curtains, forcing both the government and the opposition to concede to meetings, dialogue, and try and avert a possible armed confrontation in the next month or two. So I think in that sense, we will see possibly no possibly a response to that political conflict. But where we see challenges is in the response to the humanitarian crisis. I don't think the government is leading on that. We had a WFP director come into the country, speak about it. Humanitarian actors are coming in and speaking about it, but I don't think the government or the federal member states are leading that agenda or even responding to it. Unfortunately, a lot of the diaspora that was sending back remittances also come from the Gulf, where I think livelihoods have also been disrupted. So we are expecting that will go down. And so on issues that affect, the day-to-day lives of the Somali people, I think that's where the ball will be dropped. But there might be a last-minute push to get Somali actors not to go to armed confrontation. On the issue of al-Shabaab and, of course, the piracy now that we're witnessing that has surged in the past 2 weeks, 4 vessels were hijacked, 3 of them fuel tankers. The Houthis have reportedly since earlier this year provided Somali pirates with GPS and surveillance technology. I think that sort of insecurity will continue to increase while we are dealing with a political crisis. And this is something that I think has overwhelmed international actors. The EU nav force Atlanta has made its way to specifically one of the vessels that has been captured, but then their mandate is not trying to board or to try to respond after the act. But there's an economy that comes up around this piracy, and I think that is, to me, is much more problematic. The non-state actors moves at this time, and the humanitarian crisis, I think the crises that will probably be swept under the rug while we deal with the politics.
Thank you. I would ask a similar question to Nabil. In the case of Yemen, of course, which is obviously extremely complex because of the way the country is divided. You were mentioning in your beginning presentation. How do you see do you see any possibilities for the various forces coming together and push for an opening towards a diplomatic solution of the conflict? You were mentioning the military solution to the conflict, but the other question, part of the question I wanted to ask you is, how do you see there is a political economy that on which the Houthi thrive, and of course, as Samira was mentioning, piracy off the Somali coasts. There is a linkage with the Houthis and the mutual benefits from Shabab and Houthis that have been reported in economic terms. So how do you possibly contrast? How can the international community can possibly contrast this type of dynamics that obviously make it extremely difficult to mitigate the risks and the threats over the sea?
For me, descriptions.
Yeah.
What is related to the diplomatic or the military situation in Yemen? I think both respective available or suitable for this done between the both sides, Yemeni government and the Houthi militias, before 4 years from this time. But this long time of the ceasefire not lead to the make solution, good solution or political solution. No, the situation is not war, not peace. Every side prepare itself for the next battle and next war. I think the international community is responsibility to to push and support Yemeni legitimacy to control the Yemeni capital Sana'a, which controlled by the Houthi militias. Because the international community who was the past or in 1988, he stopped the Yemeni forces military on the border of the Hodeidah port, which overlooks the Red Sea, and banned them to enter the city. This city today under the Houthi militias, and from this city, Houthi can control the movements of the international trade and the international navigation in the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb Strait. So that we don't have any information or know why the international community stopped the Yemeni government forces to enter the Hodeidah city this time. Like this process from the international community make us without any idea about this, such is politicals towards the Yemeni crisis. Today, I think the latest developments in the region, like the Iranian-US war in the Gulf, might be back the international community to support Yemen government due to the importance of the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is longer under the threat of the Houthi militias, because it has become able to make danger on this international water strait. So that until these moments, there is no in the horizon any opportunity to the make salvation in peace or in war. Everything is in this moment stop.
Okay, thank you. And on, I have a question from the public that I'm gonna read for those who want to respond. When it comes to international waterways and choke points, riparian, direct and the state and non-state, quasi-state actors should set up dialogue and work on a common framework of cooperation to ensure their common development and security needs and interest. What Meari was referring to as the Big Tent approach. Based on best practice of the countries around the Gulf of Guinea, there is a need to work on practical framework like the UNDED Code of Conduct in the Horn of Africa and in the Red Sea. There is a need to put an end to external doctrine of containment and take into account the reality on the ground. So basically, how do you get to the framework? I mean, you all mentioned in one way or the other the need that Meari was mentioning, a gradual approach, moving in building trust and exploring actionable potential approaches through track 2 or track 1.5. Gaudat, you mentioned the need for regional actors to come together. There is potentially the incentive is there. I mean, I think unilateral approaches have shown a very high cost and definitely not great successes. And at the same time, even Gulf countries have long-term investments on Horn of Africa and East Africa, and those long-term investments require stability to prosper, to give profits, to provide long-term returns on the investment. So the incentives are there. The mechanisms are clearly difficult to set up. Perhaps a question that I ask you to all of you in closing, based on the question we received from the audience. And if there is anybody else wanted to ask, you still have time, please. Mary,
Yeah, may I take shot here? Yeah, I would like to end on optimistic note, and as I said, and as we all agree, what happened, the de facto closure of Strait of Hormuz, it is unprecedented, the first time ever. And the reaction in the long run, or it will take some time to build new pipelines to bypass Strait of Hormuz. In the short run, countries will try to expand the capacity of existing pipelines. Most important, the East-West pipeline. And this means stability in the Red Sea will become much more important because, again, most of oil and gas is imported by Asia, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and other Asian countries, Asian markets. There is no way it will be very expensive to go through Suez Canal, the Mediterranean Sea, and to reach Asia. The shortest and easiest way is from the Red Sea to Asia, crossing Bab el-Mandeb. And this is why I believe there will be great opportunities for regional cooperation because it is win-win. It is in everybody's interest. It is true that the Gulf states in the aftermath of the war will have less money, but it is very important to them, to global economy, to make sure that Bab el-Mandeb is safe. And this why, for example, Saudi Arabia and Al-Houthi have maintained the truce. As we all know, there is no peace agreement, but a few years ago they reached truce ceasefire, and so far both sides see it is in their best interest not to resume fighting. So I believe after the war stops in the Gulf states, Europe, United States, and China will try to support economic development, political stability on both sides of the Red Sea of Bab el-Mandeb.
Thank you, Gaudat, on this optimistic note. Perhaps we do the reverse. Samira, Nabil, and then Meari to close down with some comments. Samira, please. Samira? She doesn't. Nabil, please, if you want to make your last comments. You're muted.
I think due to the war, no chance for the international community to stop the roles of the states actor through restore the national state in the region, in Yemen, in Somalia, in Sudan. International community must be able to support this security and stability in this region and stop the role, any role for the non-state actors in the region.
Thank you. I don't know if Samira, you're back. I can't see you. Otherwise, Mayari, please. Samira.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back. I was trying to unmute, but it was hanging. So I just wanted to make possibly 2 points. One is that, especially that has just been mentioned by my colleague from Yemen, about the international community's role in responding to these non-state armed actors and the increase of piracy, and especially the issue around technology, the technology that might come now into Somalia, that's being used by the pirates now. Provided by the Houthis. I think we need to begin to fight tech with tech and find that there's new piracy. It's not the usual. Either you invest in affordable defensive drones, return the naval surveillance that existed, but something needs to be done to restore that the maritime security, but then also focus inland. I think in terms of maritime security, especially for Somalia, most of the capabilities have always been external, not internal, not build up of Somali security forces. Especially in this case, it will be Puntland and Somaliland, whose maritime forces are very critical and important. And so I would think would be to build that capacity inland. And then in terms of the longer term shocks, I think what is often ignored is, especially in Somalia, whether it's responding to piracy or terrorism, the response has always been one that's securitized, and no one focuses on the politics and the governance. And no matter how much we ignore it, it always comes to the fore. So the piracy that's emerging, the security issues in Mogadishu and Al-Shabaab, all point to this governance gap on land. So as much as we can, when international partners are speaking about Somalia, it's not just a security response that's required, but a focus on the politics. I think focus on the governance aspects, and to really look at that relationship that's between donors or partners. For a country that 70% of its budget is coming through donors, I think there needs to be much more accountability on how governance actually works in Somalia. I thank you. And I apologize that I've not handled anything to do with Ethiopia and Sudan. There's quite a lot to be said, especially for Sudan, but hopefully we will have one soon.
Thank you very much, Samira. The importance of looking at the nexus between governance and security. Mayari, your last words.
Yes. I think most important points have been highlighted. First, we have, if this war and this competition on the Strait of Hormuz shows us anything, that freedom of navigation on the sea is a matter for everyone. It's not a problem for a specific country or region, but it's for almost everyone, and that there will be a lot of interest on this. I think this is the first time this is made abundantly clear to everyone. So, and we can see that this freedom of navigation and stability on the sea is highly linked on the land, what is happening in the war in the Middle East. And whether there will be a solution to that or not is another thing. But I think, as you know, Luigi, next webinar will discuss about how after this, if there will be post-war situation, if there will be, how the countries will be interacting each other, those that are at war, among themselves, that Gaudat has mentioned, for example, and the role of the international community or actors, broadly speaking, including not necessarily international community in the traditional sense of the UN and other organizations, multilateral organizations, that Nabil and Samira have highlighted. The need for those kind of proactive actions will be very, very important. So I think it will take us to the main point that the urgent task is first to prevent similar kind of situation, neither in all parts of these choke points, that there is a need for urgency to start discussing about preventive measures on not having the same kind of choke points. Tomorrow, if in Yemen there is more empowerment of one party, one actor, and trying to attack Bab el-Mandeb shipping lines, effectively blocking, or you have a crisis in the Horn of Africa between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and you have another problem on that, or the situation in Sudan gets out of control and leads to this kind of situation. The same thing in Somalia too. I mean, the piracy and hijacking that we have seen is a result of the governance problems that Somalia has partly. Now, it's international, there are cooperation between. So I think the urgency on preventive mechanism will be important, and somewhere it has to start. Of course, it's not a guarantee that this will materialize. The second is resilience. I think on the African continent, for example, something that we have witnessed is Dangote and others have stepped up in providing some of the resources that were unable to move, the supply was stopped. So resilience in diversifying sources will be important. I think, again, Gaudat has mentioned that one with the pipelines, but more of those will be very important to ensure. The reason why I'm saying that is I don't see this kind of problems going away in the short term. These are unpredictable, uncertain, volatile time, and we may have to stay with this kind of situations, especially the use of force and troubles on the sea may continue to happen. So there is a need to engagement, but the good thing is next webinar we'll be discussing this aftermath of the war and what should be done and how relationship and situation will evolve and how we should what can be done. We can discuss as scholars and practitioners here. We can discuss in the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just add that the next webinar that Mary just mentioned, called After the Fire, is going to take place on 4th of June, same time. And we will be looking at the question of post-war setting and how the potential for cooperation between Gulf countries and as well as Horn of Africa countries may increase, hopefully. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in a few weeks. Thank you. Bye-bye.